In the last video, we were covering the wedding schedule portal. The next thing we want to do, if we go to the navigation menu, is look at the sister list view and find out what a list view does and how it works. Let's go ahead and click on it. The list view is a multi-row record layout that shows each individual record. In this particular case, we may recall we only had one record in here, but basically we're looking at the wedding schedule list, and it would have a list of all the individual events that are going to occur. And if you wanted to work with this, you could either use the Do Find menu, use the search, and perform the search for anything that has data within these rows, and then it would go ahead and bring up the corresponding set of information. Now remember when we were in the portal, if you had done a find when you were in the portal and it produced more than one record, you came over to the screen and say for instance before we started the find there were 20 records in here. Obviously now they're not, but if there were 20 records and you do the find in the portal, those records that were selected in the find for the wedding schedule list would now be shown on the screen in the found set. The found set being the ones that were actually found when you did the search. So obviously doing a search and performing the search brings up a found set in a list view from what was done either in the list view or in the actual portal record. If I click on the portal button, I go back in here. I can also do the search over here. And as you recall, if I had done it here and I had, say, maybe 20 records in the found set, I could pop right over to its list view and see each one of those and then click on the corresponding portal. Now let's go ahead and go down to the next portal, which is the Planner Cost Management portal. And in this portal, we'll be coming back to this when we're actually working in the planner and the cost management. But what I want to show you, there's more data in here. Now the cost manager is actually in this screen, and here's the planning cost manager right here. And if I click on that, you'll see that in this screen it's going to produce as many records as there are cost items that you're tracking, and you can have multiple tracks as far as the cost planner is concerned. For example, with the drop down, if you bring it up, you can have any of these, or you can add more to them by clicking on the row header at the top that's underlined to bring up cost types. And this is the list of cost types that are currently in here. Now you can, like I said, you can add more to the database if you want to. And if you recall from our previous video, these are editable in the actual cost type manager, but you cannot edit them in the actual iPad because these are only selection lists of scrollers. But you still can edit the list if you need to. Now these are the default ones that'll come with the application, but you can go ahead and add any new ones that you need that are corresponding to what you do and what you want to have in your cost type. Cost type is also a sister to the item type. And the item type in this particular case, you can expand this one also. And it, like for example, if it's a hotel stay and we had a charged item and we want to put it in there, or what, for example, for services, there should be room. There it is, room service. If you're doing a rental item and you want to rent something like something into a room, or say like you're at the pool and you want to have a service, if it's either a free service or it's charged items or it's a cash cost item, you paid cash for it. You want to differentiate the cast and charge items differently. If you want to do it as far as if it's a personal usage, as far as if you're using this application as an individual, or if you're the planner and you want to have the items separated by who paid what, you can do that within each individual charge item if you want to. Now, why would you do all this about charged items? Well, the logic behind charged item is that if a planner's doing individual tasks for the wedding couple or the family or whatever that is related back to the actual wedding that you're working at, you're going to want to take those each individual charge items and have information about them. If it's hotel or it's actual planning, in this case it's a planning billing, if I click on this, it'll bring up the item and show you that it's a planner bill. Basically what the planner did is it's a planning service. The initial deposit for planning, in this case $1,250, it was on this date, and it was charged to John Smith, or Jerry Smith, pardon me. And if you pick this up here, you'll see that Jerry Smith is a wedding, part of the wedding for the Smith and Jones wedding. And if you go down here, I have a test record down here. You'll be able to see each individual wedding as you bring these up. and you'd be able to pick and choose the person that you wanted to drop in there as far as the person without having to type it each time. When you're typing things and they're repetitive, you can actually introduce errors and not have the proper information in there. But when you pick them from a pick list, it makes it very simple to find the information. For example, when you added people that were invited to the wedding, including the wedding couple themselves, that information would be available in this drop-down. The calculation is done this. Over here, you take the item quantity times the cost, and it gives you the actual extended total line price. And if we clicked on the portal and came over here, you'd be able to see that information in here. Now, if you're doing the cost planning management and you have taxes, this is also a drop-down that has a list where you can edit it by clicking on the header right here and going to a list screen and change the tax rate to whatever it is for you, or edit the tax rate so that you have your own local tax rate. If you are actually charging tax, if you're not, you can go ahead and put in a blank space in there for 00, and it changes it, and you'll see it changes the calculation for the tax. If I go back in and I put in 5% instead of 9% or whatever, you can see it's going to change it appropriately for the tax that's actually being charged. So I got a 7.5 at $9.30, and that's how it's going to affect the amount paid, because it's going to add the tax to the amount that is charged. So 124 times 2 is 257.30, and in this particular case we paid 247 and the balance is 1030. And 1030 is the balance that you'll see on the reports and everything as far as owed. And if this is already paid, so if you paid the balance of this, this would now turn into 0, and the background color would change to a neutral color instead of red, indicating that there is a balance. We'll talk about doing the invoice later, because there are invoices that you're working with, and we'll go ahead and be able to see the invoice for one charge or all the charges for a date span or whatever you want to do them for. So let's pull this back down. What we're going to do now is we're going to do the corresponding list view for the cost manager. So let's go over to the cost manager list view. Now this is where you would really want to use your do action menu and do a search for the specific information that you're looking for, because in the current found set we have all the weddings. As you can see, here's the test one at the top, and here's the Smith's wedding. Now you may want to look for example, if you are in the portal record, you may want to look for everything that has a balance, or maybe things that do not have a balance. For example, if I did a find for items that have a balance greater than 5 cents, I would only see the items that were charged that were not paid completely. So then when I go back to look at the list view, only those charged items that are not paid for this wedding would be shown. And you would want to probably put in there you want to put in the Smith wedding so you can differentiate between other weddings. Or if you wanted to, you wouldn't put anything in that field when you start the search, and then put in here and say 5 cents or 2 cents or whatever it is. Anything that has a balance higher than that is going to show up in the report area on the list view, showing the balance that's due. Let's go back over and look at that. So we go back over to the planner, and you'll see down at the bottom there's a $1,715.80 in there. And that's the total of all the items that are in here. If you do a search and say you only get the Smith's wedding stuff, and you want to see the items that still have a balance or whatever in them, and the item cost, for example, times the rate gives you the total, then you're going to see the amount that is a balance. Now, because this is a list view, I would recommend, if you want to see it in the report, you can also do the find for the report. Go over to the planner and come down to the report. And in the report, you're going to see a breakdown of all the items. In the case, this is cost item ID 1. This is 2. This is the test record. This is the wedding for Smith and Jones. And this is all the items that are being charged to them. And when I said that it highlights this, you'll see any record that is not paid off in any of the sets here, that this would be the person that has a balance due. If these are not red, for example, if this is actually paid in full, then the 1030 would not be there. It'd be 0, and it would be neutral colored. Okay, so what would we do in the report? There are many things that can happen in the report. Ultimately, what you're doing in a report is you're trying to differentiate information based on whoever it is. For example, the wedding, and you have more fields in here than you do in the list view, so you have more options. For example, I could use the cost ID that is different from other records. For example, the test record would be another wedding. Its cost ID would be based on number 2, because it's a second record of all the weddings in the database. If I were looking in this database on the couple records and I saw the ID, I can actually come over here and run the report based on the cost ID alone, and it would find all the records that were charged to them. And then I can go through, like we talked about before, and maybe omit some of the records I don't want to be added and totaled. Or I would maybe want to pick somebody, say, for example, who were they charged to? Maybe it's Jerry Smith. Maybe this is, if it were Frank's or one of the other people in here in the wedding party, and it was charged to them, say like they did room service and something like that, and you want to make sure that the planner knows that if she's paying the whole bill or then being reimbursed by you when it's summarized, or if you're doing the bill and you ask her for a report of everything that Jim Franks charged so that you can make sure that he paid his bill, then you would be able to have that in here. Now, how does the wedding planner know what is going to be charged and what is not? Well, that's only important to you if the planner is the person that's actually building the charge list. In most cases, if anybody in the wedding party, the groom, the groomsmen, or say, for example, the wedding couple themselves, do charges and they have the planner cover those costs, then you're going to have to pay the planner back. So what you're seeing here is if, and that's a big if she's taking or he is taking, the planner is taking the information and setting up the charges and paying the bill, and then coming back and having you reimburse it, then you're going to get an invoice for all the items arranged by you as the person being charged for the items, and then an itemized bill of all the items that you need to pay. Now, if I do a find and I do it for ID, and I'm going to do this just so you can see it, I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in number 1. Keep it very simple, straightforward. So I'm just going to put in 1. Then I'm going to run the report, and I'm going to go ahead and say perform it. And it's going to come back in. You'll see 2 found out of the records and 1 omitted. It was very quick, but it was still there. And you can see that there's a balance here, and then it summarizes the balance down here for you. And then each individual item is separately calculated so you can see what the individual costs were for each item that's in the billing system. So this is pretty organized as far as keeping track of all the costs. Now, obviously, as the planner, you may want to use this in your own unique way. As long as you cover your cost of expenses and paybacks, then you'll be able to manage it and produce an invoice for the couple or whoever you have to produce an invoice for. One of the other things you can do in here that I wanted to show you is you'll notice that the headers are missing. There's a button on reports where if you say run the report, it reproduces the individual header up here so you can see the wedding and information that is in there for the wedding. Now, if you want to print this, you would go in and you could say print record. You would come in here and you could pick how many you want, the paper size, the orientation, the scale, and so forth. And I could say, for example, just go ahead and show it as a view in the, there you go. Now there's a view and the way it would print. Now you may have to scale it just to get it to come down a little bit to put it on the paper depending on the paper that you're working with. And if you go to the end of the report, and most of the time it'll be at the bottom of the page, or you do next page when you're actually viewing it, it'll print as many pages as you tell it to do, and then it'll summarize the report at the end of it. So at this particular case, it's summarizing the sub for each record and then putting a grand total at the bottom of it in the report. Okay, to get out of this screen, you would go ahead and click back to the main screen by going done at the very top or at the side, and it would go back into the record. Okay, so we've covered quite a few things. Let's recap a little bit. We started out by going to the wedding schedule. We looked at the schedule list view. We looked at the cost planner portal. We looked at the cost planner list view. And then we went down to the planner cost report and ran through the cost planner report. And now the next thing we're going to be covering after we leave the planner cost manager report, we're going to go into the client invoice and cover that. Let's go ahead and go in there and look. Now, when you created a search in either the portal or the list view, what it's going to do is it's going to change the way that the invoice works. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's go back to the portal. In this case, I'm going to go into a record over here in the portal. And if I do a lookup for, say, the record number 2 of cost ID, let's do a find, start the search, go in there and put the number, actually let's put the number 1 in so we get a little bit more information. And we're going to go ahead and say perform the find. And when we come over here, we have 2 records in this group right now in the found set. Now if I go to the invoice, or even the list view, if you go to the list view, you can see the information is only for those records that we had in the find in the search. And now if we go to the invoice itself and look at the invoice, you're going to see that the data that's in the invoice is the one in the search. And it gives the summarization for cost ID 1. It puts in the record header for the invoice for the person. In this case, we have Brian Jones as the person that's actually going to be in the information here. And if you wanted to add somebody different, you can go ahead and do that as far as who you want it to go to. But in the actual report for this, the person that was being charged, as far as the charge person, would be Brian Jones. Now you can see 2 records. One is a hotel services and the other one is a planner bill, and it's for the initial deposit. Remember that from those records. Since we created the data in here on the other side in either the portal or and in the list view, the data available in this for search is somewhat more limited. So it's easier sometimes to go to the portal and find exactly what you're needing and then view it in here. If, for example, if I said show all and I showed the records and I had the other record number 2 and clicked on that, it would change the header data up here to that person for that record. And also one of the things I want to show you here is it shows the planner's business address and information. You can put this by clicking in it. This is a global, so whatever you put in here and stylize it the way you want to as far as your business information, that would show up on all the invoices. The invoices themselves print the area from here to right here. These are not printed. This is excess information that is used in the actual invoice for you to manage information. And for example, let's go ahead and take a look at this. In the wedding group here, we're going to see that it is for this wedding. If I went back and I clicked on show all records, then it would show both records. If I wanted to omit one of the things from this record, say we had 10 items or more, all you have to do is click in the actual item or anything in the field on the row that you want to omit, come over to the Do Action menu and say Omit Record, and you can see that it's shortened it up and recalculated everything, and now you're only seeing the data for the particular record that you want to view. Now, interestingly enough, if I go back here and say Show All Records, I come up and you can see when I do this, it lists everything, but it looks different. The reason it looks different is you're now showing all the records that you completed on a search, and what it does is it abbreviates the information and doesn't put the headers back in. To put the headers back in, click on the Run, which is Run the Report, and you'll see that it adds the headers back in. And now, as I showed you before, we have the test record and the wedding name for each one of the records that are currently in the found set. And like we said before, if you wanted to make this only for ID number 1, go over here, and then what you do is say Omit the Record, and then that one would show. Now I'm going to show you a little trick, and you might want to think about this. There's ways to use this. If now I wanted to say show only the omitted, I can say show only omitted, and what it's going to do is going to bring up the record now for that one set record that we had on the other side. I say Run, and you can see that now it's wedding number 2, and now I'm showing the information for the omitted record. Where would you use this? Say you wanted to omit a number of different records within a found set and then show them both ways. I might want to see all the charges for one set, and then I want to see the ones that are omitted and the summary for those, and I can go back and look at that as well. And as we pointed out before, if you want to see the information for all the balances that are due, in this case there is a balance due sum on this report as far as the invoice is concerned for each record in the found set. Now if I go back and I say show omitted again, guess what? It's going to bring back the other records that we were looking at. It's kind of magic. And now it's going to show the result of the balance due for the records that were on the original thing before we changed over to show all omitted only. So it's just, you might want to look at that a couple times. It might seem a little odd that I'm doing that, but I just want to show you the flexibility of using omitted records. Now let's take a look at the data on the actual screen. What we're looking here is we can see the cost type, and this is hotel services, and down here we'll see the item type, which is a charge or a planner fee, and then it breaks it down in here. So you have the information that tells you what the line items are for, shows you the cost ID, and then the information for the quantity, the cost, the date it was made, the person that it's being charged to, and that's very important. The person that's being I want to point out one more thing. You'll notice that it didn't actually hunt for and drop down in the invoice. You could have done this in the actual portal, or when you do it here, when you start the search. Let's go ahead and start the search. And I'll go back in here and click on this calendar. This is not anything. This is the one for all the value items. So what you want to do is, if you're going to add or edit, and what I did is I blocked some of these so that people couldn't edit the record, and that's a good point to make at this point in time. For example, the field for the actual wedding, the one here in blue when you see it on the other screen, does not allow you to edit it during the time that you're not in search mode. But when you're in search mode, it does allow you to edit it. The reason for that is there is a risk that people are going to come into the invoice and accidentally change something without even considering what the problem is. Let's go ahead and say perform the search so we can see what comes back. Say cancel to bring it back. And you'll see that the information that is provided in here, for example, John Smith, is not a pop-up in this record, but it would be in the portal and in the list view. You can also go to change the rates from here by clicking on the tax rate. And when you do the drop down, you're going to see there's a 00 if you want to just put in 0, and then whatever tax rates that are in there that you want to use. You shouldn't edit these in here. You should only use them as a drop down list as far as actually looking at them. The iPad and iPhone, because of the kind of device that they are, they will bring up the information for the key to key in information, and you do not want to do that. You want to change it in the actual tax rate and use it as a drop down. Now when it's in a drop down on the iPad or iPhone, it's not going to allow you to edit it in the field itself. It doesn't like you doing that. It would just be a drop down list to select the one you want to use. The tax fee is calculated based on the amount of the balance times the tax rate and gives you the tax fee. If you want to pop back over to the portal and do a search or change the records in some way, you could click the portal record and run back. And then if you want to use the run itself, you would use the run to rebring in all the headers and all the calculations and totals for that information. One of the nice things that you can see in here too is when you're collecting money for your charges that you're taking, if there were sales tax added to it, you would want to make sure that you can have a summary for the sales tax, because you will need to break that out, and you're paying the sales tax back when you're reporting the information. And if you collect it as the planner, then you're responsible for calling up the amount that you've actually charged and show the taxes. If it's for the individual person in the wedding party, then they're responsible for the taxes and you would not have to report that. Now, obviously, when you're looking at the invoice and you're running the information, like we talked about in the prior screen on the portal, if items on this are not charged where you have to be reimbursed, then you would not want to include them in the totals. So what you would do is you would use only the items for the item type and cost type that are related to things that you need to be reimbursed for. It's that simple. You may, if you have information in the records that is not necessarily used and you're not going to be using it, you can go ahead and delete that particular information by going to the portal and saying delete the record because it's not supposed to be part of the actual charges in your system, and it'll reduce the amount of charged and owed in your application as far as the balances are due. Preparing the invoice, you can always click on the invoice button here to go to whatever record is related to what you're in the current portal. But as we stated, you can also make a search and find a group and create a group based on the records you need in the found set. If you have questions about how to use this, which it's kind of cryptic in some respects, but some people see it as straightforward. Other people that have never done accounting in any way may have some issues with it. And also, if you're giving this application as a present to the wedding couple to manage their own information and keep track of their data, you're going to want to explain this to them or let them be aware that they can watch the videos to see how to use all the stuff that's related to invoicing and keeping track of it. It may be a very interesting thing to see how well people work with you and work on the cost and balances that are due so that you can keep them abreast of what they owe you or what you consider things that they should be aware of that are charges that are coming up, either scheduled or things that they need to be aware of. For example, you may be adding additional billing charges for planning based on changes that occur during the process of doing the wedding preparation. Things always happen out of sequence, it seems like, and you always have to go back and keep your wedding party and groom and bride up to date as far as what's going on and how the charges are going. And they need to stay within a budget. So this gives you also the ability to see how things are actually being budgeted, who's paying what, and who is it charged to, and who's responsible for all the documentation and everything that's related to funds and fees and charges. If you have any information requirements and you need more help, you can always go to the Do action, go down and go to the developer's website and give us a call or send us an email that related, or do a chat online to the questions that you have. Thank you.